Hey everyone, this is Ryan Naylor again with another episode of the Built to Grow Playbook podcast, where we talk about how you can grow your business, building the perfect playbook, either operationally or the people side. And we love to bring in experts to talk about kind of how they've done it, how they see it, what they've learned along the way. And I got another wonderful guest, Rob Young, here with us. Rob, thanks for being on and joining me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Rob, just to kick things off, will you tell us just a little bit about kind of yourself and your business that you run?
My company is called Stage 3 Group, and basically I focus on companies that are either in or transitioning to the third stage of the business life cycle. And I refer to that as the teenage years of the business. So
The
no
ugly
longer
side.
startup, but no longer or no not fully mature functional adult either. So I do not necessarily have a pedigree for business. I did an undergraduate degree in theology and another in philosophy. I did a short stint in medical school of all crazy things and just kind of stumbled into a business career. Was fortunate to have an employer who saw potential in me and took me in under his wing and invested in my growth. And so after a while, I became an executive and then got burned out on corporate life and have always loved working with my hands. And so I left corporate and started buying and renovating historic houses. And I worked side by side with a lot of great contractors and tradespeople. They were fantastic people. They were fantastic at their craft, but they didn't know how to run their businesses. So I saw these people I cared about lose their businesses, and that just gave me a mission. And so now I work with small business owners who've never been trained to run a business and help them focus on the business aspects of their companies.
That's fantastic. We work with a tremendous amount of home service pros, and they really are pros. I mean, they're
Yeah.
absolute frontline necessity industry for all of us. And we saw that more than ever through COVID is the importance. I put them in the first responders bucket. And when you've got an elder parent or someone that's, HVAC went out I'm in Phoenix heat, middle of the summer, you better hope you get one of these pros to come out and help your family get up and going again.
Right.
But you're right. There tends to be some business challenges. They're pros in their craft. Sometimes the business application of it isn't first nature. Talk to me about what are some of the common problems that you do see.
Well, they've never been trained to run a business. So I wrote a book, and in the book, I talk about the three essential functions of a business. And I don't care if you're a one-person startup or if you're a multinational corporation. There are three essential functions. One is product making, which is providing the product or service that you sell. The second main function is customer getting. And so that's selling and everything upstream of sales. And then the third component is navigating, which is running or managing the business. So people start their own businesses for a couple of reasons, but usually they are tied to either the craft. They want to practice their craft the way they want to do it. Maybe there are lifestyle pursuits that they have, but no one ever started a business to focus on managing. I've never had a client say to me like, I love making policies and procedures, therefore I started my own remodeling company. So what I have seen is that when the company is young, they can get by without a lot of attention on managing it, but it's when growth happens and growth brings complexity. And so that's when things fall apart. So they don't have processes or procedures. They may not have experience hiring people. The bookkeeping and accounting tend to get less than the attention they deserve and so forth. So that's where I've seen people get into trouble.
Dave Ramsey has an incredible podcast, the Entree Leadership Podcast, and he talks with these small business owners all the time. And my favorite thing that he talks about is exactly what you just said, which is your treadmill operators. They're still on the tread. They get into business on their own, but they essentially bought themselves a job.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ended up buying themselves like 10 jobs because now they're doing HR, they're doing finance, they're doing all the things. And then they've got to do the other employees' jobs because they called in sick or they no-showed on a job site and everything else. And it tends to create more chaos than freedom. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
A lot of business owners, the bigger they get, the more stressed and chaotic they get.
Until they get the team behind them and it well organized. And so we provide a framework and a playbook to help companies know what to do. So we don't do coaching. We get in the trenches and to help them build the systems they need and then turn them loose. But yeah, absolutely. They tend to just create chaos.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So some of the chaos they might feel, just a piece of paper that says this is a process, to me doesn't actually fix the problem. It just creates more hand holding and finger pointing of what someone's not doing. How do you work with these companies to get them to create a process and then hold a team accountable to actually execute the process?
So we do that. Before we do any of that, we make sure that there is a good foundation in place. And so for me, that is having a good business plan and a good budget. Not only will those things provide guidance for you, but they're really guardrails. So one of the things I've seen companies do, I refer to them as opportunity goggles or upside goggles. So there's an opportunity that they see, and it may not be in their sweet spot. They may not have the money to pursue it or the staff or anything like that. But it's like, wow, this is a great opportunity. We can't miss out on that. And so they put on these upside goggles and they pursue it. So they get into trouble. So we start with a budget and a business plan because they tell you not only what to do, but probably more important, they tell you what not to do. So once we have that in place, then we look at processes that need to be developed. And so we prioritize them with a series of questions. And so I ask them things like, what process, if it's not done well, has the chance to hurt a client? That's a high priority. What process, if it's not managed well, has a chance to hurt the company or cost money? So we look at those, and then we look on the other side, like, all right, what thing, if it's done really well, will help the company? So we tend to start with things like sales, and then we talk about production, whether that's a home service or something else. I'm big into swim lane diagrams. If you're familiar with those, they're graphical, and we just make sure that there are people who are able to hold people accountable to living up to those things.
What's an example of a process you tend to find not documented, not well organized in most companies?
I have found sales to not be documented very well. I think the big risk is that sometimes sales is perceived as kind of a personality driven discipline.
An art, it's artistic, is as opposed to a science, right? That's kind of the way they'll frame it.
Right. And I think there are elements of both, but I think it definitely has to be process driven with specific checkpoints. And I'm not a big believer of necessarily memorizing a script. And if a prospect says this, I respond this way. I think it should be more natural, but there should be certain messaging. There should be certain steps and documents and so forth. So that's a big one. And honestly, if you can get the sales flowing without the owner having to devote a ton of their time to it, then there's freedom, there's money rolling in, the owner has capacity to work on other things. So that's one we often see.
What are some of kind of the emotional roadblocks business owners face that you've worked with?
It's their baby.
Yeah.
They built this thing from scratch and it's hard to let go. I get that. No one is going to have the same amount of passion or concern for the business that the owner has. But that tends to be the biggest thing. So, and that's another way process development helps. If they see, all right, we have something defined, it's not up to them and their personality and their force of will. Other people can run with these things.
There's a lot of truth in that. Trust, letting it go, the confidence it's going to be done the right way, right? And I think those checks and balances also provide training opportunity to bring people up to par to what an owner would want it to be done. One of the things that I've noticed, and I'm going to have a hard time articulating this, so maybe help me out. I've worked with a lot of home service professionals over the years through my digital marketing agency and scaling and growing them to, this Ava HR software. We've got hundreds of these home service pros hiring, posting jobs, people side of it. This permission to accept the business without them in it is very difficult. And I understand what you said. It's their baby, but it's almost like they're having a hard time giving themselves permission to be successful. Like they've got this grit and this hard work ethic, and it's hard for them to realize the ability to be successful without actually putting in the grit day to day in the truck. Does that make sense? Do you see, is there like this weird handoff there where it's just kind of hard to not be in the trenches?
You've probably heard this phrase before, until the pain of doing nothing is greater than the pain of doing something, people will continue to do nothing. And so oftentimes, even if you make a great case for, all right, we turn this over to someone, here's the process, until the owner faces enough pain, sometimes they just hold on to those things. But I have
Mhm.
seen that being the catalyst for change. Like, I just can't do this anymore.
What are some signs of that breaking point?
I have seen contractors, like big burly contractors, almost in tears because their home life is suffering. And that's a
Mm,
big one. They're devoting so
yeah.
much of themselves emotionally, physically, their time, their money. It comes to a point where they're struggling with their family. And that is a big one. No one comes to me because the business is doing so well. Like, hey, it's doing great. Just thought it'd be fun to have a coach or an advisor. They usually approach me because they're in some level of crisis. And I've had multiple people approach me like, I don't know how I'm going to make payroll in 2 weeks. Can you help? And so when they reach that level of pain, they're ready to do something.
God, two different stories, same pain though. Like that's gut wrenching on either side. The home life is falling apart because they're too much their eyes on the other ball, right?
Right, right. These people are all incredibly smart. They're really hardworking. They've just never been trained to run a business.
Yeah. What's typically the breaking point? Is cash flow also? I mean, you mentioned that cash flow. I don't have to do payroll, but is cash flow a contributing factor on why people don't invest into more people, more systems, more processes? Because it is more expensive.
Yes, I think that's part of it as well. Part of it is they don't have visibility. And so I've had a number of people say, look, we're making a ton of money. I have no idea where it's going. I don't know if I can afford someone. To figure out where I am financially, I log into the checking account in the morning and that's it. I have no visibility to what's coming in or to what's going out. They have some broad idea like, yeah, payroll's next Tuesday. This particular project has a milestone payment, but it's very vague. And so I think that's part of it as well. They don't have the data to make good decisions.
You got an example? Who's someone you worked with in the last year where you've seen the systems and processes kind of help transform their business?
So I have a client here in Columbus, super high end custom builder. Like,
Mm,
I don't know what the market is like in Arizona, but a multi-million dollar home in Columbus is a pretty big deal. And, they're doing homes well in excess of 3 to 5 million. Really frustration with the client, between the client, because the client didn't have visibility. The builder wasn't able to produce the documentation for the costs and so forth. And it just got ugly. And there were weeks and weeks and weeks of potential litigation. And the builder was absolutely on the up and up, was spending the money appropriately, but just didn't have the processes to document that or to even update the customer effectively. So that was a pretty significant event.
what did they do?
We worked hard, we got the numbers together, presented it in a way that the customer could see, and it smoothed out. But the problem is the reputation is already damaged. If you're going to provide a top notch product, the whole customer experience needs to be top notch. Again, another pain point that was a revelation and got the message that we need to have good processes in place.
I think that's common, right? In the contractor, sometimes maybe we're not communicating as well. That it tends to be a recurring complaint. What are some systems or processes to put in place around communication with the client?
One of the things that I have seen that is really effective is establishing a roadmap for the client. Here's what to expect in the different stages. And to be honest with them, because if you are having work done in your house, whether it's a minor remodel, a major remodel, new build, it's scary. Most people don't understand what's inside of walls. They're not expecting the level of what they perceive as chaos and dirt and all of that. So we talk about not only the phases of the project, but the emotions they're going to experience. And almost every contractor I've worked with, at some point, their clients hate them. Like, the house is a mess, it's dirty, it doesn't look like anything's getting done. And it really is. So we set them up for that. And then we remind them of how we warned them. Here's the roadmap. Let me just tell you, we're at this particular point we warned you about. We know what we're doing, but having good presence online. So we make sure that people have good face-to-face meetings with the customers at least once per week. But we're always, every day the contractors are uploading pictures to the portal that the customer should be logging into. So we try to give the customer too much information rather than not enough.
A lot of home service pros, sometimes they're one and done projects, right? It's swapping out a condenser and you're done. Your relationship's over for that moment, that season. But it might be coming up. And then you've got the builders that it's a 18, 24 month endeavor relationship of working together.
Mhm.
I just recently went through myself where we went through this multi-million-dollar commercial office renovation. We were kind of blind into this, first time ever doing it. And I loved the experience because I got to sit on the consumer side of it. And one of my favorite things that we did is every single Tuesday, rain or shine, we had a standing meeting, the project status meeting. Our GC would sit down with us and say, what are the things you want to talk about? So we'd have a bucket of issues. We'd have our issues bucket because I have a tendency to text the GC at like 11 o'clock at night, hey, I got thinking, what about putting a 4-prong outlet instead of a 2-prong, or let's run data cables from the closet to that spot. Like, he doesn't need to know that at all different hours of the day. And he's going to lose it. And then I'm going to get frustrated. Oh, I sent it to you. Well, no, I didn't get that. Oh, yeah. Well, that happens so much to create miscommunication. So instead, we worked inside of this little project tool that they had put together. And I just simply, idea would come to my head, open up the app, and I put it in my issues bucket. And then every Tuesday, 10 o'clock, we start with our issues bucket. We give it 20 minutes. Let's go through all the things in your list, Ryan. And we go bang, 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 bang. And then it was his turn to talk about, here's what our issue bucket is. And here's what we see for the next 10 days. We always did a 10-day rolling scope. Here's what you can expect. Here's our delays. Here's the things that are on schedule. Here's the things that we should be looking forward to. That sense of transparency and organization kept us from going just absolutely crazy on almost over communicating or under communicating based on your expectations of what should be happening. Because you and I, Rob, probably communicate very differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I can only imagine I communicate a lot differently than a general contractor or subs. Anyway, I just found that really fascinating, is the power of an issues bucket bi-directionally. They had an issues bucket, I had an issues bucket, and we sat down and we were able to collaborate it for 20 minutes, and we were done for a week. Didn't have to bring it back up.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of value in that from a lot of businesses. And I know that's kind of like an EOS mindset as well. I think this company runs a lot on EOS actually, and they do their probably weekly cadence meetings with issues buckets. But is that something that you've seen is having good concrete communication expectations with clients? Does that tend to change customer perception?
Yeah. And so I think there are two elements of that. One is, and I'm sure your GC had a standardized agenda. He wasn't just like, all right, what do you want to talk about this week? It was a standard agenda. And then there was a technology. So, if you think about how people communicate, phone calls, email, texts, whatever, and stuff is going to get lost. So when we go into a new project, we say, this is the way we communicate, and it all has to be done through the system. So I refer to it as a line of business system, whether it's construction or home services or what have you. All of the communication is done that way, so nothing is lost. So I think good technology to hold the communication, and then a good agenda so you cover what needs to be covered.
How do you help a failing business? What are some of the first things you look for? They call you, Rob, I'm sure they don't call you when everything is picture perfect.
Sure.
They call you when there's pain.
Sure.
What are some of the first things you do to help a failing business?
I have an online assessment. It's 50 questions. It takes 5 to 10 minutes to go through it. And it's online. They hit submit, and it automatically scores them in these 10 different areas. So that gives us some insight. We have a talk, like, where do you want to be? Where are you? What are the crises going on right now? And we try to address them. And so if you think about it, the only two things you need to do to be successful in business, you need to be profitable and you need to generate cash.
That's it.
Yeah. Sell your product or service for more than it costs you to deliver, and then get paid for it in a timely manner. So those are the key things that we focus on initially. If there are personnel issues, and I have had this as well, where these business owners are so nice and they want everything to work out. They have non-performers who are just totally damaging the culture. They're not producing, and they struggle to fire them. And so sometimes I either will sit with them in the meeting or just I'm the cheerleader to help them do the difficult things they need to do. We try to stop the bleeding, whatever it is, and usually it's related to finance.
Do you find a lot of the people problems are more training problems? or skill problems? Like, where's the gap that most people need to think about before firing someone?
I've seen a lot of small business owners get into trouble because they hire family and friends. I've seen that so much, I can't tell you. And so you have people who are not performing. And then it's not just a boss and an employee relationship, it's a friend or a family member, and it becomes really, really difficult. So that's part of it. I think if you don't have clear expectations, regardless of whether it's a family member, a friend you've hired, or just someone who applied for a job that you'd never known before, if you don't have clear expectations, key performance indicators by role, it can be just like you're operating at the gut level as opposed to having very clear directions on what you want to do.
Yeah.
One other thing, and I wanted to point this out earlier, related to the people issue, is sometimes the biggest difficulty is the transition for people. So we talked about putting together processes and how important those are, but person you might have hired when you were a startup or an early stage company, that person probably likes the chaos, thrives in the chaos, is very valuable to the company. But when you get to the point where you start implementing and then enforcing procedures, sometimes those people don't like it. And I've seen people sabotage that direction of trying to enforce policies. And I don't know if it's intentional. I don't know if there's any bad will behind it, but it is a different organization and they don't like the change. That has also been something where I've seen owners where they need to fire someone and they struggle to do so because the person has been so loyal for so long.
Going back to the it's hard to teach new tricks to an old dog mantra, right? They've been around a system or a process. And I think that's where a lot of business owners fail to understand is if you don't have a system or process documented, it doesn't mean you don't have a system or process. It just means it
Right.
wasn't ever documented. And so when you start documenting it, chances are it's changing.
Right.
And that change has a hard time being received by employees if they don't understand the why. And so communicating, articulating the why can create a culture of trust at the same time. That bridge of trust is very, very sensitive and it can quickly collapse if it's not articulated to align with the vision and purpose of what's changing in the business. If a business owner just comes out and says, hey, we're changing the system, you got to do it this way, Sally, you did it that way before. Now we got problems. Sally's going to be frustrated and
Right.
feel like there's disrespect, right? You didn't like it how I did it before after all these years and all the sacrifice I've given to you. But being able to articulate that with vision and structure and a why, now that feels a lot easier to swallow.
Sure. So you talked about the bridge of trust and that can collapse. I think the bridge of respect as well, respecting what they've done.
Mm.
And so how I've seen that work well is the owner will bring the people in and say, here's what we're trying to do together. Let's collaborate and come up with the best process we can. So that tends to bring more buy-in to the changes. And I've seen that work very well.
That's a great idea. Yeah, get those who have been doing it to start contributing. They're going to take some accountability themselves, right? If they're the ones that are starting to drop some of those systems and changes and ideas.
Right, right. And the fact is, the owner may not have the best ideas. These people, if they're in the trenches, they've developed some level of expertise with those things. And so why not leverage their insights?
You mentioned at the beginning, there's areas where businesses quietly break, and you've got kind of a 10 building blocks to kind of address and refine through these businesses. If you wouldn't mind, maybe share with us what are some of the blind spots for most small business owners in their business or in their processes?
Well, I don't know if it's related just to their processes, but I think it is their desire and what they love to do. And so again, the business aspect of the business is often neglected because people have no desire to do that. It's kind of a nuisance to say, oh, I'm going to get to that. And they struggle to do that. So I see more of building a framework for running the business and then incorporating rhythms. So I'm a big believer that individuals, especially owners and leaders, need to have rhythms so that they document everything that needs to be done. We go through a process called task mapping, and I have little erasable marker boards, like 3x5 cards, and we just jot down every task that they can think of that needs to be done. We organize them by function and see, well, who's actually doing these things. Sometimes it's not just process, but it's changing the owner of a particular task or process. So it makes sense in terms of the way people are gifted, and makes sense in way work flows through the organization.
Listen, I think all of us would be lost on our computers if we didn't have folders and
Right.
buckets and a way to keep things structured and organized. And I think a lot of times we don't think of that as a business. We need an operating system. We need to have buckets of information, accountability. Where does that process live and breathe? So I think that's fantastic. Rob, you've been tremendously insightful. I think building better systems builds a better playbook in a business and a lot less stress.
Yeah.
If there's accountability and ownership and you know who does what and when they do it, that can be really a peaceful transition for a company.
Sure. Well, and there's a word I've coined. It's called BEHU, which is an acronym for best and highest use. And so we ask that as the owner, what is the best and highest use of your time? It's probably not entering stuff into QuickBooks. You probably hate doing it anyhow. So bring in the people to do, what they're wired to do. And I know there are books that have sold a lot of copies that would disagree with me. But I think if you're a business owner and you love your craft, maybe that's the secret sauce of your business. So do that. Continue doing that. You can get people at reasonable prices to come in and focus on the business end of the business. You're still the CEO. You set the tone, the culture, the performance standards, and all of that. But you can have someone else doing that stuff. Go do what you love to do, what you're good at, what you're wired to do. And I think sometimes we get the message, hey, you started a business, get your butt at a desk. Sorry, you love to do the craft. You can't do that anymore. And I think that's the wrong approach.
Rob, I'm going to leave you with one question.
Sure.
Rob, you're at a party. You got 60 seconds to help a business owner. How do you build a company that grows without consuming your life? What do you say?
You need a framework and a playbook and a team, whatever it looks like, to help you manage that.
I love it.
So it's as simple as
Awesome.
that.
Rob, how can people follow your journey and get to know you a little bit more?
So my website is stage3group.com, stage the number 3group.com, so they can find me there. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a book. It's on Amazon called Stage 3 Success. And I would hope at some point it's going to be perceived as a good alternative for people who found EOS to be too complex. So those three mechanisms, I'm
I
available
love
there.
it. No more teenager businesses out there. Let's mature them a little bit.
Teenage years can be fun, but yeah, let's move on.
I've got a couple teenagers right now, and I'm excited for them to move on.
I get it. I get
So I
it.
can relate. Rob, you've been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ryan. It was a pleasure.